I have a few minutes after, so I think we'd like to go ahead and get started. I thank everyone for being here for this Education Appropriations meeting, and I'd like to start off with a prayer. If Chairman Nix, would you be able to lead us off with a short prayer this for our meeting? Thank you very much. Well, where?
In the middle.
Nope.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be on mic.
You don't have to be, Mike. Just do it. Thank you very much. We do have a sign-up sheet here if anybody would like to public comment at the end. We have some speakers lined up here, and I want to appreciate everyone in my committee, Howard, Chairman Maxwell, and Chairman Coleman, Chairman Nix, and especially Sarah here for being here this afternoon. I also have some local constituents from my home county, Crawford County, here, and I thank them for being here up at their capital here today. Well, we'll start off with our professionals, and we're going to try to be brief, try to get through this today. We've got some time laid off, but we do want to hear from each of y'all that have positions in the budget, and thank you for the good work y'all do. And we'll start off with Professional Standards Commission, Kelly Henson, if he would come up and tell us a little bit about your budget.
Chairman and committee members, thanks for the opportunity to come before you during these hearings. I want to start by very briefly highlighting just a bit of our work at PSC I think would be of interest to you. We are charged with the certification and licensure of educators. We believe we issue certificates more efficiently than any other state. Our average processing time is 6 days. In most other states, it's measured in months. In FY17, our CERT division received almost 85,000 phone calls and 97,000 emails. Certification also provides support for school districts, colleges, universities, and RESAs in the field. We are charged with enforcing the Georgia Code of Ethics and seeing that members of our educator workforce act in an ethical manner. Our ethics staff opened 1,801 investigations last year. We get an average of about 125 to 150 new complaints every month. That's an increase of 14% over the previous year. We are charged with educator preparation and program approval for all programs that prepare teachers, service personnel, and leaders. We currently have 74 approved providers and 880 approved programs in our state. The PSC, in cooperation with colleges, universities, school districts, the department, and RESAs, has revised leader preparation in Georgia, creating a two-tier system to better meet the needs of different types of leaders. Tier 1 programs prepare candidates to assume the positions of assistant principal and district-level leaders that do not supervise principals. Tier 2 programs prepare candidates for the position of principal, superintendent, and district positions that supervise principals. Tier 1 programs are very content-focused. Tier 2 programs focus primarily on the job on-the-job clinical practice. Now I'd like you to turn your attention to page 8 and section 27.6 of your tracking document. All changes included in our budget and the governor's recommendation for our budget are statewide changes. So we have no changes that are not statewide changes. Mr. Chairman, I can read those out, but they're in front of you, so unless you see a particular need for me to read out those 4 or 5 statewide changes, I will not. I want to thank you for your time and continued support of our agency. And Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to respond to any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Members of the committee, any questions?
Chairman Coleman, you always have a question for me.
How's our teacher recruitment coming? I keep hearing there's shortages, there's not a shortages, and there's a push to need them to come back to work half-time, and then I got a question I want to ask about half-time if I can.
Okay.
How's that looking?
Our official shortage areas in Georgia are special ed, math and science, and Spanish, if I remember correctly. But teacher shortages vary completely and significantly from district to district. One district may not have a shortage in any area. Then you get into certain parts of Georgia that are hard to staff districts, and they may have shortages in every area, including early childhood. So you really can't paint every school district with the same brush. The shortage, it looks different from district to district. In terms of recruiting, we are an importer of teachers in Georgia. We have tried to make the landscape as friendly as we can to invite quality teachers from other states. And I will tell you that we also have a very aggressive and outstanding alternative preparation program for career changers that want to be a teacher to find an efficient way into the classroom. And our alternative preparation program, if I remember correctly, typically year to year places about 20 to 25% of all new teachers in our classrooms. Our current state teacher of the year, if I'm not mistaken, was alternatively prepared. So hopefully that responded to your question, Mr. Chairman.
Then I'll be through. I have one that wanted to drop some legislation about returning to work full-time. You've seen that before. We've tried that before. But one thing that was questioned was the half-times that are coming back, half-time teachers working, 49%. And the fact that they're not paying any retirement, anything in the retirement. And I know there's a push, as we heard this morning, there's a push to maybe looking at shoring up retirement. Do you think it would help if the ones, because a lot of systems are using 2 half-time instead of 1 full, and not having to pay those costs? Do you think it would benefit the teacher retirement system if we had them pay those costs if they come back half-time? I'm putting you on the spot. I'm putting you on the spot. You're a former superintendent, you do know.
I will tell you what I did as a superintendent, and in terms of impact on TRS, you've got their esteemed leader in the audience, and he'll be talking to you in just a couple of minutes. When I was a superintendent, I took full advantage of 2 half-times to fill 1 position. It made all the sense in the world fiscally. You saved money, and there were many good candidates out there for me to employ that would be willing to work on a half-day basis. It's also very good at the high school level for your master schedule, because you don't have to invest a full position in social studies. You could invest half of that position in social studies and the other half in science. And so, since you asked me based on my experience as superintendent, I found using half-time teachers coming back to be fiscally sound for the district, and it gave us immense flexibility in terms of meeting employment needs with personnel.
Thank you, Mr. Henson. Is there any other questions of him from the committee? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming in. Next, I'd like to call Amy Jacobs of Department of Early Care Learning to come, please. How are you today? Thank you for being here.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. And we want to say we appreciate all the support that you've extended to DECAL over the last many, many years for all our programs and services. Our budget is on page 1, section 22. We have 4 budgetary programs, and the only changes to those programs are statewide adjustments this year. There were no other changes to our budget besides the statewide changes. Happy to take any questions.
Is any questions from the committee? I'd like to ask something. We've had discussions before about spaces. A lot of your centers need an extra classroom or two, and could you talk about that with budget and that sort of thing, trying to match up spaces with budget?
Well, if you're referring to Georgia pre-K classrooms
Yes.
specifically, that's what we hear a lot of times when we're trying to add classrooms in places where there are students waiting to be served by Georgia pre-K, is that either the school system just doesn't have the space or private childcare just doesn't have the space. And we haven't been able to find a solution to that just because we would be limited with how we use our lottery dollars. But that has come up, and unfortunately there's not much we can do from the state side on that.
So what's the student teacher, you have to fill up a classroom before, and I really appreciate you helping me with one of my counties for finding providing another classroom, and also, so you kind of, you have some are maxed out and others have space, so.
Right, it just depends on the location in the state, and if we get a call and either a school system or a private child care provider says, we have 20 kids or 22 4-year-olds that really want an experience in Georgia pre-K, we have a place for a classroom, we are a quality type program and we can get teachers, we'll fund your classroom, because what we want to do is serve 4-year-olds. So if you've got the space and you can hire the teachers and you've got the children, we'll fund your classroom. That's not an issue. It's more of an issue where you don't have the space and there are children waiting.
Thank you very much. Your early care learning and pre-K very important.
Thank you.
So thank you for the good job you do. Do I see any more questions from the committee? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Next, I would like to ask the Office of Student Achievement if Kiana Good is here, and I hope I got that right. So thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee members. It's a pleasure to be here today. I will be very brief. I have been serving as the Executive Director for the Governor's Office of Student Achievement since January 2nd of this year. There are really no new items with the exception on page 9 of 27.7.5, which provides funds to establish a statewide leadership academy. And this is to support aspiring principals and principals, and it came directly out of House Bill 338, which formed a joint study commission to look at the establishment of this work. We are in full support. The rest of the items under 27.7 for our office are those same statewide agency changes. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Absolutely, it would be my pleasure. GOSA actually is a P20 agency, and so we have the pleasure of serving alongside many statewide partners from the Department of Early Care and Learning going all the way to the Department of Labor. I think of our work really in 3 main categories: the Governor's Honors Program, which is a residential program for gifted, talented high school juniors and seniors across the state. We successfully relocated the Governor's Honors Program to Berry College in Rome. That has been a wonderful transition. Berry College has been a wonderful host, and our students are able to enjoy that campus fully. They've closed the campus for our students, which is wonderful. We also do quite a bit of work with data, research, and evaluation. And so we provide downloadable data files for researchers. We also have we evaluate programs from DECAL's early learning, the E3Zs. We evaluate our own work. We also provide dashboards that can be used to provide transparent data information to all of Georgia's citizens. We also report on the progress of existing educational programs. So just last month, we presented before the State Board of Education about the current status of the strategic waiver school systems. Finally, our last bucket is our innovative grant funding. And so that is the work that's probably nearest and dearest to my heart because it allows us to fund classroom teachers and innovative educational programs across the state. And so our professional learning work, our innovative grant funding work, that's a really large umbrella, and there are several different types of grants that are under each one of those. Most recently, we awarded $7.1 million in grant funding for Connections for Classrooms, which allows us to expand broadband access. We also recently awarded 4 classroom teachers an Innovation in Teaching Award, which provides money to the teacher and also to the school. I'm very, very fortunate to serve alongside a wonderful team. So GOSA has 52 employees. About 20 of those are in the field, so they serve as our reading mentors, our grant support specialists. During the Governor's Honors Program, which occurs over the summer, we also employ an additional 100 staffers, and that's everything from our teachers to counselors and to the administrators to run that program. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Do I hear any questions from my committee?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll never set up here. I don't know how to turn this. There you go. Thank you. I appreciate you saying you're appreciate being here today. I know you probably just didn't have a root canal, having to come out here and talk to us, but thank you for coming anyway. The statewide academies, is the statewide leadership academy. How many are they, and where are they going to be located?
Yes, sir. So really that work is, there are going to be 2 parallel tracks. One would be to build a pipeline of aspiring leaders. And so the idea is that would be statewide. That the idea of what a great instructional leader and the importance that that principal has, we want to make sure people have those skills and that knowledge day one before they enter. The second track would be for those who are already serving as principals. And so this idea is it would focus primarily on those who are serving in those turnaround schools, and this would provide them the ongoing support that they need to be successful. It would be a statewide program, and there would be regional components of that work.
Will that be online, or will they have to travel off-site?
They would have to travel off-site, but that travel would occur after school hours. Okay. We would never want to take someone away from the school building.
Thank you, ma'am.
You know what I'm going to ask you about?
Yes, sir.
I'm very excited about the $5 million grant. And do you have any idea at this time how far along we are? Because I've been trying to spread the word all over the state, and I'm sure everyone that's sitting in this room today is a member and has already pledged their $1,000. But
if they have not, I strongly encourage them to, because I'm very confident that we're going to reach that $5 million cap in the next few months.
Because it's looking good. And I'm meeting with, isn't it true? I'm trying to meet with Lynn Riley, our commissioner. She's going to do a little seminar, and maybe want to invite you over. She's going to show us how to make it, easy, where a first grader could do it. But and isn't it true that we really need to get that sunset off that, because that money is very important?
I am in full support of the sunset being removed. Yes, sir.
All right, that's very good. And do you think we are going to make? Now that's the first year we're going to try to fund about 12 or 15 of these wraparound. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Okay. Based on the needs of that school community, absolutely.
Very good. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
I've got one request. I've got one of your programs, Governor's Honors Program.
Yes, sir.
Great program. It's been around many, many years. It's just top notch. I hear so many good things about it. And could you look into something? I was asking Sarah here how many high schools we had. Now, how many students, do you know how many students go through that program each year?
Yes, sir. So that number ranges from anywhere from 650 to 690 students who are accepted as finalists.
Well, could you look into our high schools? I'm afraid some are not having access. Some students there are not, for whatever reason, are not gaining access into that program. Could you look in to see how long some of our high schools have not had a participant in that program, and could we try to do something to try to encourage the administration or the students in those schools that have not tapped into this program in quite a while to do that? It's a concern of mine that I ran into in one of my counties this year, and I don't know if you've got that data, if you could look back, or who in your department runs that program to try to see. I know you've got great distribution between metro and other areas, but I just worry about some of our smaller schools not really keying in to encouraging students to apply for that program.
Certainly, and I share your concern. So we do have that data, and I will make sure to provide it to you, but we are looking at doing more regional outreach. So the program manager, Mr. Ricky Palmer, he is looking at traveling around the state, particularly in those areas where we've not had a finalist over the past 3, 4, 5 years, to communicate to both those district coordinators and teachers, those nominating teachers, what the program looks for, what supports exist, because we want to ensure that this program is representative of the state.
Yeah, would you say you'd like to have a student at least every 3 or 4 years from a school?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Do you have any idea how long it's been some of these schools might have had a student? Could you get that information for me? I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
I just like to see that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on our list, I'd like to ask our ERS system, Jim Potvin, if he could come, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm Jim Potvin with the Employees Retirement System. So I'm looking at section 25 on page 9 of the tracking document. We have 4 programs listed here. The first is deferred compensation. So this refers to our Peach State Reserves programs, our state's 401k and 457 plans. The only change is a change of about $250,000 from FY18 to account for the expected growth in that program. That growth is mostly driven by additional 401k accounts due to new hires in the GSEPS tier of the ERS pension plan. So we've been seeing, a few thousand new accounts in the program every year, and we get charged by our administrator on a per head basis. And so this is continuing along the track that we've seen for the past several years since the GSEPS program was effective in 2009. The next two, the Georgia Military Fund and the Public School Employees Retirement System, the state makes direct appropriations to pay the actuarially determined employer contribution, also known as the ADEC, and the changes refer to slight differences between the amounts paid in 2018 and the amounts that we're requesting for 2019. So the Georgia Military Fund is going up about $160,000, and the Public School Employees Retirement System is decreasing by a little over $600,000. And finally, we have the System Administration Program. This is the main program that funds all of our administrative activities for all of our defined benefit plans, and there is virtually no change in the budget from year to year there. Beyond that, I'd be happy to take any questions or give you an update if you'd like.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions from the committee? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Teachers Retirement System, Mr. Buster Black, if you could come forward. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Friend I think I called you the wrong name, Buster Evans. I'm sorry. I know you very well. And I've got another person I know who has a different last name, but thank you for being here.
It's our pleasure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. We appreciate the honor to serve you in the state of Georgia as director of the Teachers Retirement System. Three things I really would like to be able to address this afternoon. Certainly, we want to go over a quick agency update, go over our budget. Actually, our operational budget is a slight reduction, so hopefully that part is not a big issue. But there is one issue that has been, I think, on your plate and before you, and that's the issue of our actuarially determined employer contribution rate that has gone up this year. So I do want to provide you any information that I might be able to provide you as far as that is concerned. So to start with, let me give you a little bit of an update about our system. First of all, we do have over 400,000 members. That includes our active members, our retired members, as well as our inactive members. Almost all of these come from 5 different agencies to include K-12 education, Board of Regents, our county extension agents, Technical College System of Georgia, as well as our public library system. One of the interesting things that you'll see, and again, I'm not going to go through the entire presentation that you have before you, but we actually have seen our number of active contributing members increasing, which is a good thing. During the last fiscal year, we also saw our number of retirees slightly decrease. If you also look on that first page, you will see that our assets on page 2 are listed as of January 1 at $76.6 billion. We had a very good year on our investment returns, ending June 30th, 2017, with a 12.5% return on our investment. The first 6 months of the year have already been very well as well. Now, the last 2 weeks have been a little bit crazy, but thus far we are actually doing very well on our returns on our investment. As it relates to other information regarding our teachers' retirement system, if you turn to page 6, you will see a couple of things that we think are numbers trending in the right direction for us. And the first chart shows our active contributing members. And you see that for the first time since 2009, we have gone above 226,000 active contributing members. When we attempt to answer the question, why are we experiencing an increase in that actuarially determined employer contribution, certainly one of the reasons would be, one of the 2 big reasons would be, is that we lost contributing members. As many as 15,000 contributing members a year was the drop that we saw in people contributing to the retirement system. Also, a number that we see trending in the very positive direction is our TRS change in net position over the last 18 months. During the last 18 months, from July 1, 2016 to the end of December, you see our assets going up over $10 billion. So we hope those trends continue. We think that in the long term, that will mean a greater funding status for the fund. We also think that over the long term, unfortunately not in the short future, it could see us having a moderation of that employer contribution rate in the future as well. And I'll certainly be glad to answer any questions that you would have about this information, but I would like to turn my attention now to our FY19 budget, which is on page 10 of your tracking sheet. You will notice overall we actually have a slight decrease in our operational budget. The only part of this this $39.7 million that comes from state operating budget is the $240,000, which is listed in line 45.1. This is a floor amount of money that was put in place to be the floor of a COLA for 6 local systems that were merged into the teachers' retirement system, I think sometime back in the 1970s, but I wasn't around then, but that's what I understand, and that number is a diminishing number. You'll see operationally for us, we're dropping about $500,000 due to expenditures not going into IT that had to go in the previous year before that. So that is a quick overview of our retirement system and where we are at. I do want to point out as we talk about the future of that actuarially determined employer contribution, to try to give you a number and to try to hopefully some assurance that this is not a runaway train. But on page 11, our actuary provides us a review of where we believe that contribution will go in future years. It's a little bit like predicting the weather. The closer we are to that particular date, the more accurate that we can be. But certainly within a 5-year period of time frame, we feel pretty comfortable. You see that we went from in 2018, 16.81. The proposed FY19 budget would see that number going up to 20.9%. Currently, the actuarial projection shows that number going up another 6.5%. Tenths of a percent up to 21.56. But for the next 4 years following that, we should see that actuarially determined employer contribution dropping a little bit down the way, even until in 2024 dropping back to current FY 2018 levels. Again, we typically look at those numbers from a long-term perspective. Again, the closer we are to the current date, the more accurately we're able to make these projections. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes the comments that I have to share, but we'll be certainly glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. A lot of information here. I appreciate you bringing it.
Could you answer that question about?
Yes,
About
Chairman
the
Cole.
half times? Could you comment on that half-time versus no pay? Versus you wish they'd pay, and you've been a former superintendent, so you address that too.
Yes, sir. Certainly, I did the same thing that Mr. Henson has done in the past in utilizing retirees to come back to work. Actually, we have about 12,000 retirees who come back to work in the state of Georgia. About 3,000 of those come back as substitute teachers. So they're a valuable asset to school districts, particularly in that substitute teacher realm. We work with systems all the time to help them get back in place science teachers, mathematics teachers for those critical field areas. But we do see a number of people going back into various sources as a resource, which is relatively, certainly a cost savings to a school district, that we're able to hire 2 of those positions without paying either the TRS contribution or the state health benefit contribution. In some cases, those funds may or may not be, but may be earned by the local position school district as a part of their QBE earnings formula. We all would agree that there's not enough money to fund education, but I would certainly tell you that number one, this might be an avenue to generate some additional resources into the retirement system, which would help make up some of this difference that we've seen to capture some contributions that are not currently coming into the system. It's one of those things that I don't know that there's any one silver bullet that's going to resolve all of our issues, but I think if we look to find out what are those few little things that we have been able to do, and in your presentation, there are some things that we've done over the years, including that first $37,500 tax offset. We've looked at making adjustments along the way and some assumptions. We've also changed the fact that we have a closed actuarial formula, which will eventually pay off our unfunded liability. So I think as we make little adjustments along the way, those are positive steps, and by making several of them, we can make a bigger impact on the system.
Thank you. Chairman Maxwell, you got a question?
My friend, Mr. Evans, thank you for the presentation and looking at these contribution rates on page 11. It's still going to be based on the lowest rates that we've had in the last few years, 16%. In 15, that was about a $1.4 billion, I believe, bottom line hit. So we're going to be putting in anywhere between 1.4 to 1.6 billion dollars a year in the true dollar amounts for these contributions. So that's not going to be dropping under $1 billion in a while, which we like. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do believe that would be a correct assessment.
Okay, thank you.
If I don't have any more questions, thank you. Appreciate that good presentation. Thank you for being here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for the good job you do. Absolutely, absolutely.
I'd like to take the privilege to recognize some students. They're fifth graders and some eighth graders from Gwinnett County. And Omar, Ishner, the Ishaq family, raise your hand back there in the back. Raise your hand. Those young people are seeing how government works. They want to come in and see. This is where the money is being decided, young people, and we appreciate you being here. So thank y'all.
Thank you for being here. I know Chairman Coleman, nobody in this Capitol knows education. He's got more enthusiasm for him than he does, so great job. Next, I think we're down to our last presenter, Mr. Ted Beck, DOE. If you could come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So our budget is fairly quiet this year. It looks a lot like it has for this past several years. What you'll see is in accordance with the governor's budget instructions, we've submitted a flat budget, but for the K-12 funding piece, so the parts that we would otherwise call QBE. So if you're looking at your tracking document, this is section 24. Rather than read through all of the statewide changes, I'll just briefly tally those up. The only one of the four with any real material financial impact is that TRS funding piece, where for TRS members going from an employer contribution rate of 16 to 20-something%. As you might imagine, we have a fair number of staff that come out of the K-12 system, so we have as many or more TRS members than we do ERS members. So for us, the total impact of that across the department is an increase of $4 million and some change. The other three are fairly nominal amounts, so unless you guys have any changes specifically about the statewide changes, I'll move on to what I would call the QBE adjustments.
What was the question?
If you had any questions about the statewide changes, otherwise I was just going to roll through to the...
No,
okay.
Go ahead.
All right. So the first programmatic change that you'll see is section 24.9. This is page 4. And there goes that. This is the GNETS program, and you'll see a recommended decrease in the program of about $4 million. This is indicative of a decrease in the number of GNETS students that we have across the state. So we as a department have been working in earnest to make sure that students are placed in the appropriate environment. And so if there's an opportunity to place a student in a less restrictive or a more appropriate environment, we're working with our partner districts to make sure that happens. So all told, compared to last year, we have about 200 fewer students in the GNETS program, which generates the large majority of that decrease. The next change items are in section 24.12. This is on page 5 for the non-QBE formula grants. These are programs that are based on student enrollment counts, but they're not part of the QBE program proper. Two of those are reflected here. One is a decrease in the residential treatment facilities grant program. The other is in the Sparsities grant program. Both of those are due to just minor decreases in enrollment, either in the RTF side or in those schools that qualify for the Sparsity program. Section 24.14, just down the page, this is the Preschool Disability Services Program. This is where the state is funding services for 3 and 4-year-olds that are receiving some sort of treatment service inside of the K-12 system. The enrollment or the types of classification of those students has changed to either presenting a more severe disability or just a few more students in there, but they're fairly expensive when they do enter the program. And so the increase of the $1 million that you see there represents the enrollment change for that program. Section 24.15 is equalization inside of the QBE program. So both 24.15 and 24.16, the 5 mil share, are tangentially related in that they both reflect some sort of change in the state's tax digest at the district level. So for the equalization program, what we're seeing is that statewide the total tax digest is up about 5%. It's about $50 billion from what it was last year. This is the, I think, 4th year in a row that we've seen an increase in the value of the state's tax digest at the local level. When that happens, more often than not, you see an increase in the cost of equalization, because what we're saying is any districts whose tax digest is below what you consider the statewide average, we're going to catch you back up to that, depending on, we just multiply that difference by the number of students that you've got. And so as the tax digest recovers in value, you usually see a corresponding increase on the equalization side. And so what we've seen is just that. Conversely, in the 5 mil share program, this is the funding that the state constitutionally says districts have to more or less put up to participate in QBE. So what we're saying is that at a minimum, 5 mils of your local levy are going to be used as your what you're putting into the pot, essentially, to participate in QBE at a statewide level. And so we reduce what the state owes in terms of the QBE amount by that 5 mil offset. And so as the local tax digest increases in value, this number goes up, and it makes the QBE as a whole less expensive to the state. So again, every time you see these multi-billion-dollar increases, you'll see a corresponding $100 million or so decrease in what the state's going to push out through the 5 mil share program. Section 24.17, the QBE program itself. This is on page 6. So these are the major changes in our budget for this year, and the foremost of those is the first line item, section 24.17.1. This is the TRS adjustment for the state's instructional core. So all the teachers inside of our K-12 systems, this is the corresponding amount needed to fund that rate increase for just the state share of that teacher's salary. So if there's a local component that's being paid to that teacher that's beyond the state salary schedule, that's up to the district to fund, but for all the state-funded pieces of that, the state funds it through the QBE program. So that's about $290 million. 24.17.2, this is where you see actual enrollment growth and the training and experience for the instructional core. We talked about this with the midterm adjustment, but it's a fairly slow growth year so far. We're compensating for about 6,500 new students in the K-12 system. That's out of a body of 1.7 million. That generates this year about $120 million in increases there. 24.17.3 is the math and science teacher supplement program. We've just been seeing fewer of those teachers apply or otherwise qualify for that program, and so we are paying out, we believe, fewer of those in the FY19 cycle. 24.17.4 is a slight reduction to the school nursing program. There's no policy recommendation here. This is, again, a formula-driven calculation. The net result was that you're earning the supposed salary of either RN or an LPN for every so many students that you've got inside that system. When we added everything up this year, we had systems that lost students more often than systems that gained students. So the sum result is a slight decrease in what we're paying out in nursing services across the state. 24.17.5, this is the state commission charter school supplement. So these are the grants that go to any state authorized charter. A lot of growth in that area just in the number of state authorized charters. I think we've added, no, it was 4 last year. I think another 4 came online this year. And so this is the student enrollment piece of those schools. And so it's about $10 million. And finally, 24.17.6, this is an adjustment for charter system grants. This used to be a much bigger ticket item, but when we introduced the idea of flexibility for school systems and allowed districts to declare themselves either charter systems, strategic waiver systems, or to stick with the governance framework that they had, all but 2 chose to be either charter or strategic waiver. And so for several years, we were paying out a supplement. It's about $100 per student inside of a charter system. And so we've funded most of that, so this is the last little bit of increases that you'll see on a year-to-year basis for any system that's declared themselves charter. Anytime they have enrollment growth, you'll see a nominal increase in that amount. Finally, section 24.21, this is the state schools program. So these are the 3 schools that the Department of Education runs for both the hearing impaired and the blind. There is a small increase there on 24.21.5. This would be just like any other school system that sees changes in the types or growth and experience in their instructional core. Our teachers tend to stick with us fairly for a little bit longer than maybe a normal teacher would. I think that a lot of that's due to the fact that they're very specialized in their training and these are the areas they want to work in. But as those teachers become more experienced and go up the scale on the state salary schedule, they become a little bit more expensive. And so this is funding related to our teachers' training and experience result. And so those are the budget changes that we have. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have about our budget or the department in general.
Thank you, Ted. I do see a question. Chandler, Joyce.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Ted, I have had several complaints, not complaints, questions in my district about why we were reducing funding for school nurses.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned that, but would you go over that again so
Sure.
I can be sure I have it correctly?
So you earn the theoretical salary for both an LPN at one every, I'm going to look at my guys, 750 students or so, and then you earn the salary for an RN for one in every 4,500 students. And so it's completely formula driven, so it's just a number that we calculate based on your enrollment. This year, we had more districts that lost students than we did districts that gained students. Statewide, the number went up 6,500, but when you want to look at it on a district by district basis, there were more enrollment decreases than increases. And so as a result of that, for those districts that were seeing fewer students coming in, they were losing, they weren't hitting that threshold as often. They were, getting to the next 750 students or the next 4,500 students. And so when they did that, we see, as a result of the formula, fewer funds going out the door. There's no policy piece to that. There's no recommendation that says the state wants to fund school nursing less. It's just a component of the formula that's entirely driven by how many students you have. And so when that shifts up or down, you see a corresponding change in the amount that the state puts out.
Chairman Cole.
A couple of questions. Equalization, if I could.
Mm-hmm.
We changed, I think you were here, we changed that formula. We need to save, what, a couple of hundred million something, and change the percentage, lower, whatever. Are we meeting the needs by doing that? Are we meeting the needs of those really poor systems that, because we're eliminating, I think, the bottom, 10 or something. Are we taking, I'm concerned that we're not really giving the money where it needs, some that really need it. I'm putting you on the spot.
Yes, sir. I think there are lots of different ways to look at the financial experience of districts that have substantive tax bases and ones that don't. We as a state choose that particular measure, the tax base itself, to determine whether we're going to call that district relatively wealthy or not wealthy. I don't know enough about how other states look at that, but I know one thing that gets talked about a lot is potentially looking at median income of families that actually attend school in that district as a potential alternative measure that may be more indicative of what happens inside the classroom, and as opposed to what that county just happens to be able to generate. One of the things that I hear a lot of is that districts where exemptions have been passed, particularly the senior exemption, can have a pretty deleterious effect on the tax base. If you, particularly if you're a county where people like to go to retire, all of a sudden you have a lot of folks that live there and own property. They're not necessarily directly contributing back into that school system. It just ranges. So if you're a winner in the system, in the current way that we do that, I don't hear as many complaints. If you're a system that's on that bubble that sometimes gets equalization and sometimes doesn't, I hear a lot more out of those systems.
I guess I'm asking you, I hear there are those out there, and a good many, that we're missing that really need it.
I wouldn't doubt that they have an
true?
I'm sure that they could use every dollar that they were given.
But if they need it, okay, we are missing, okay. And may I ask the second question about recess?
Absolutely.
Recess are very important to me, and I think we're giving them more and more and more to do. And I know the state, y'all are at the Department of Education, giving them a lot more to do. Do you think they're, a pointed question, are they properly funded, What do we need to do to bring them up where they can do it? Because we're asking them to do more and more and more. And with grant, see, right now we give them grants, so we tell them how to spend it. If we took those grants and just gave them the flexibility, you know, I know y'all give them mostly grants, I think they could do a better job. But we give it to them and then tell them how to use it. What's your opinion on that?
My personal opinion is that, yes, you're right. Most of our funding is program specific. It's to do something around math education or literacy, or to assist districts in some sort of planning or curriculum development. So I think it would depend on what the legislature's interest in either seeing those particular programs funded, or, as you said, seeing each individual RESA being funded to go do what it thinks it needs to do for its member districts. They do receive a fairly substantive amount of funding from the state and from the federal government through the pass-throughs and the title programs, as you're aware. So I think it really just depends on whether you believe the RESA would be a better partner if it was able to kind of control its own destiny with those funding, or if you were more concerned with being able to see statewide results for certain programs.
Well, we've given our school systems complete flexibility, and we're saying each district is different, and they need to determine their needs. But it seems like we're not doing that with RESA. We're saying, okay, here you are, but you got to put it here, there, and the other. I just wondered. I feel like maybe we need more flexibility for them, because most of their funds are grants. Is that not correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Are there any more questions of Ted from our committee? Well, thank you, Ted. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you guys very much.
If we see any things else, we'll get in touch with you. Okay. Before I go to our, we've got a sign-up sheet, and if anybody has not signed up, want to speak, please let me know, but we'll start with this list. Before I do, I see a very distinguished group of teachers that have just walked in over here on our right-hand side. And I know one of them very, very well. And I don't know who's the leader of this group, but she might very well be Carrie Beth Tidmore Jones. Could you introduce your group who just walked in?
We're part of the LEAD CTA group, and so we are a select group of 20 teachers from around the state that's chosen to do this program. And it's a partnership between Georgia Department of Education, Georgia Association for Career and Technical Education, and CTER, which is our resource network.
Well, thank you very much. I know this group's very well educated, and Carrie Beth got a very good education at Dickey Farms, working for me for many years. And I'm a much better person for it, so thank you. I think first on our list, former Representative Ed Lindsay, is he here? I'd like for Ed to come up, the former whip. And Edward, please tell us about what's on your mind.
The former chairman of this committee for a short time period. I was very honored to serve on this committee, I believe, for 8 years. I'm here representing the Georgia Charter School Association. And before I start for my ask, let me also give a hat tip to, I don't know if she's still here, but to the Georgia Governor's Honors Program. I was a 1976 graduate of that program, so I'm very glad to see that it's still being well funded. We're here on behalf of the Georgia Charter School Association to ask for you to begin funding HB 430, which was passed last year to help provide facilities fundings to charter schools. It was subject to appropriation, but the funding anticipation within the bill was $100,000 per charter school. We recognize that if we're not in the budget at all, we may not get that amount this year. That would cost approximately $8 million to fully fund the program, but we would sincerely ask for this committee to begin putting it in as a line item and let us build toward fully funding that program. We are, in addition to representing the Georgia Charter School Association, I'm also a board member of a startup charter, Brookhaven Innovation Academy. And I can tell you from personal experience how important this sort of program would be toward us being able to provide the same level of funding, whether the same level of facilities that are enjoyed by more traditional schools within the state of Georgia. And basically what the bill anticipated was that the money would be going toward either the purchase of real property, the construction of property, or the lease of facilities. And that would be something that would be critically important to not just my charter school, but to any charter school operating in the state. I believe, to give you an idea of the difficulty that charter schools face versus traditional schools, within the entire state of Georgia, only 3 charter schools are eligible for eSPLOST. Although every school system has the capacity to include charter schools within eSPLOST, but only 3 actually choose to do so. And those 3 involve facilities that are actually owned by the school systems. Most charter schools are not in that situation. Mine, for instance, is leasing property and anticipating construction of property. To give you an idea of how difficult it can be, particularly in urban areas, the Brookhaven Innovation Academy is currently located in Gwinnett County because it was a whole lot more financially feasible for us to do so. We do also have Hannah Heck here, who's on the board of the Georgia Charter School Association. She'll be talking in greater detail about some of her experiences also as a board member. But I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.
We'll
Thank you for your
certainly take it under
consideration.
consideration.
Thank you for
Great
your
program.
consideration.
I'm going to skip around these things. I'm going to do Gamble. Next, I'd like to call Matthew Gamble. Come on. Georgia Association of Career and Technical Education. Okay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to speak briefly about an issue that's very near and dear to our hearts in career technical and agricultural education. And before you, you have a list of the FY19 capital equipment requests that have been made by local school systems and submitted to the Georgia Department of Education and approved by the State Board of Education. I know that I have spoken and given the list to Chairman England, and I wanted the opportunity to address you today as well. This is the equipment that actually provides the teaching resources for these programs. And so if there's a school system on this list, that means they're in the process of implementing a new lab in their school for next school year. I wanted to bring this to your attention. It totals around $14 million in requests. And that's not currently in the state FY19 budget, and so that basically, in a nutshell, is what this list of requests amounts to. And I know that Sarah has also been involved in looking into this up to this point, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about this.
I don't have questions unless you got some magnifying glasses. I can read this a little bit.
I'm so sorry about that. Next year, middle note, I'll make it bigger. But and I appreciate you recognizing our leadership group. We have our lead CTAE group here. This LEAD program is like basically Leadership Georgia, but for CTAE classroom teachers. It's a year-long program, and this is our second session that we've had since the program started back in the fall. But they're the brightest and the best of CTA teachers from around the state, and they are on a journey to help them become and be better leaders in the classroom. So they're here today, and I just wanted them to see this opportunity as well.
I'm glad you brought them. I tell you, I'm very honored for you to bring them here in this committee meeting. So thank you for the good job you do, and the great job those teachers do. They're very committed and great program, and couldn't say more better things about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
If y'all got any questions, anybody got of y'all got any questions for this committee?
Uh-oh.
They know it all. No, it sounds like a great program. So thank y'all for taking the time to be here. Next, I'll call it Joel Mackey here. Yeah, Joel, come on.
Good afternoon, Chairman Dickey and committee. My name is Joel Mackey, and I represent the Georgia Vocational Agricultural Teachers Association, and I've got a couple ag teachers in the group today as well. So great job for Matthew and the group of ACTE folks that are here. I want to start with echoing Mr. Gamble's comments about the capital equipment. A portion of that $14 million that was approved and requested includes about $2.67 million for agricultural education, which provides, Mr. Gamble said it great, resources for teaching the most basic aspects of our agricultural education program. So we would encourage this committee's support if there's any way for that funding to be provided in the bond package or otherwise. That's critically important to our program. I want to speak about three really other quick matters. One relates to the TRS issue we've already spoken about. 70% of all of our young farmer positions salary are state funded, as well as our area teacher program, which area teachers are strategically located throughout the state, and they provide key support for both relating with local systems related to agricultural education, but also coordinating activities of our students. Those fundings did not, $8,000, that's 2411 in your tracking document. There's about $8,000 in the governor's recommended budget for the 4% adjustment for those two programs, the state portions. That number is, we believe, closer to about $202,000 to actually fund the 4% increase for the Young Farmer Program in the area for the TRS match. The other two notes that I would make, and I'd love to answer any specific questions about this, are two very exciting aspects of growth in our program. Ag education continues to grow throughout the state, certainly in rural areas and urban areas. What that has done is we've added, on average, 14 to 21 new ag ed teachers throughout the state over the past 5 or 6 years. Some of those in middle schools, some of those in high schools, but the result is we've kind of not been able to keep pace with our extended day, extended year funding for those programs. As many of you know, a critical aspect of all career tech education is kind of this idea that we're going to engage with students where we find them, including in after-school supervised agricultural experience programs and through the FFA. Those are funded in part through our extended year, extended day contracts, and so we were short about $153,000 in FY18 to fully fund that aspect of our program, and anticipate, based on growth, that number being about $253,000 in FY19. And then the last thing is, many of your, especially in rural areas, have a young farmer program. We saw those numbers cut quite significantly by local school systems decisions back during coming out of the Great Recession. Those have been coming back, and they're providing a great resource in our rural communities for adult education, young farmer education, and as that has grown, we've increasingly had a need for professional support. Historically, we had an executive secretary, a full-time position, and that position was eliminated to a part-time position as a result of the economic downturn. That person recently retired, and so we've asked Chairman England, and would ask this committee as well, to consider funding that position, and then that request with benefits is around $100,000. So let me say, Ag Ed is live and well in many of your districts, and I want to say how much we appreciate the support of this committee, and would love to we'll be glad to stand up here and extol all the great things that our teachers are doing, but in the interest of being brief, I'll stop there, and if there's any questions.
Thank you for the good job. Yeah, Ag Ed in my part of the world, in my constituents, very, very important. Do a great job, and a lot of dividends there for students for that. So, appreciate you being here. Any questions, Joel, from the committee?
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to be here. Next on our list, Mary Frances Williams if you'd come, please. School nutrition.
I'm Mary Frances Williams representing the Georgia School Nutrition Association, and I just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity. So the Georgia School Nutrition Association actually has a couple of asks this year, but first, before I even say anything about that, I have to thank you so much for the quarter increase you gave to the PSERS multiplier last year. It increased the retirement income for those ladies, mostly ladies, and was hugely appreciated. And so we were just really delighted with that. We'd like to get another quarter and get up to 1525, but and that information is there. I will just say one other thing about that, and then I'll move on to the other thing I wanted to talk to you about. I actually multiplied it out, and so the current PSERS benefit after 30 years is $457.50 a month, for a total of $5,490 a year. So you can see it's a small amount, but we're so grateful for your support. So I want to talk a little bit, and I know there were about 90 school nutrition ladies here at the Capitol last week, and so I know they talked to a lot of you. And we're requesting that $2 million be restored to state funding for school nutrition in the fiscal year 2019 budget, and that would be line item. I mean, our school nutrition is in the DOE budget is at line 24.13. So just to give you some background, during the economic downturn, those funds they were at $39.8 million. And over a period of years, they were cut 44%. It stabilized with this committee's help at $22.5 million by fiscal year 2014, but at that point, we lost about $16 million. And that funding there's sort of an interesting formula that decides how it's distributed, but the bottom line is it really is helpful, and it's a little bit of a cushion for these school nutrition programs. I know a lot of people don't know this, but school nutrition programs are fiscally self-contained, and they are having to pay the increased health insurance costs, which have gone up from $500 and something to almost $598.20 in December of 2015 to $945 in January of 2018, and that's per member per month. So at this point, a lot of school nutrition programs are paying as much or more in benefits as they are in salary to these ladies because they don't make a lot of money. And the impact of that is that it's made it more difficult for them to buy the food they want to buy. And listening to their stories last week, I heard tales of one school nutrition director has a local farmer that provides lettuce that her kids just love. She said they don't want anything else. They don't want romaine. They want this particular lettuce from this particular farmer, and it's expensive. She gets as much of it as she can, but she can't get it as often as she wants to. And just putting funds back in the state school nutrition fund would help with things like that. I heard tales of school nutrition directors who are having difficulty purchasing whole muscle chicken. I didn't know what whole muscle chicken was a few years ago, but one school nutrition director told me she has kids put their head in the kitchen door and say, "Are we having the good chicken today?" And they don't. That's the chicken that they like. I mean, and school nutrition directors would like to be able to serve that. They really want to serve more fresh fruits and vegetables from Georgia farmers, and this would help them be able to do that. They had many stories about the different products that they're buying from Georgia farmers, and they want to do more of that, but that costs more money, and with these rising health insurance rates, it's just really put a pinch on their programs. So adequate funding allows us to accomplish our ultimate goal of serving healthy, nutritious meals to Georgia school children, and we can't stop the rising cost of health insurance, And it's nobody's fault really, it just is what it is. But if we got some of this, if we began to get some of this 16 million that we lost out of the fund over this period of time, it would help us, it would help make our programs a bit more whole. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee? Well, out.
Thank you, ma'am. What's the average price the students pay for school lunches? And does it include that we pay, some schools furnish breakfast, lunch, and after-school meal, is that right?
I don't know, different programs pay totally different. I can say, I've been told that the average plate cost is $3.50, which doesn't sound like a lot. I mean, that's the cost to prepare it, but that includes labor, equipment, everything. And the other thing is, that money is federal funds, and they.
That's the dollar. I know that.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, I didn't know this, but they don't get paid for a lunch unless it's eaten. So they prepare the food, but if a child doesn't take that plate, they don't get paid. They get paid per meal that is eaten. So that would be tough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Members of the committee.
Next on list is Helen Sloat. Helen, if you. Yeah. Dick. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I'm bringing friends. I'm Helen Sloat. I'm with Nelson Mullins, and I'm here today on behalf of Together Georgia, Youth Villages, Multi-Agency Alliance for Children and Kids Peace. And I'm going to let Mr. Tysinger, I think he's following me on the list, but I'm not. I'd like for him to speak to a specific instance here that I'm here to talk about. First, I wanted to thank you and your committee for all the work that you've done over the years for the residential treatment facilities. You've been very helpful with the non-QBE formula grants, which are at line 24.12 on the tracking document. I would like to bring one thing to your attention. As you know, Georgia has a number of children in its foster care program. And now the numbers are around 14,000 on a daily basis. Many of those children are actually taken care of by the private providers. And the private providers that I'm here really about today are the 21 that actually have schools on their campuses. And in an effort to try to meet the state's needs, there have been instances where those providers have actually built additional beds or developed new programs so that they could take care of additional students and or children on their campuses. And there is an issue that is happening, and it's happened more than on one occasion, where when a program meaning a facility such as maybe Devereaux or Twin Cedars or the Methodist Home or Georgia Baptist, and in this instance, Kids Peace, brings on additional beds, there's a need to get those beds funded so that those students can actually be educated in their classrooms. So what we'd like the committee to think about in going forward is that so we don't have to come on an individualized basis to ask for money for their educational instruction, but that perhaps there can be some forward funding for these programs in the future. I believe that that's the way the charter schools are actually funded. I may be wrong about that, but that was my understanding. So today I have with me Dick Tysinger and Patricia Prince, who are actually with Kids Peace, and they have a specific request as it relates to the Kids Peace facility here in Bowden, Georgia.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much for hearing our dilemma that was just described. My name is Dick Tysinger. I'm from Carrollton. I've been a volunteer for Kids Peace for 8 years. I have with me Patricia Prince, who is on the front line as the school principal of our in-house school at our facility in Bowden, Georgia. At our campus in Bowden, just a general overview, we provide therapeutic and educational programs and services to 60 teenagers right now who face psychiatric, psychological, educational, and behavioral challenge. In other words, kind of the toughest of the tougher folks. Most are diagnosed with severe depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and our substance dependency. These issues are almost always initiated by some trauma suffered by these kids earlier in their life. And by the way, while we're located in Bowden, we serve kids from virtually all the corners of the state where kids need this kind of treatment, even though we're located in Bowden. These kids come into the custody of DFACS and DJJ and are referred to by these state agencies for treatment and rehabilitation at our facility in Bowden. So we are very close partners with these two state agencies looking after our state's troubled kids. Of course, a major component of what we do for these kids is through our on-campus school. Our principal, Patricia Prince, is here, and she's on the front line every day and can also, if you have any questions about the staffing and structure, she certainly can answer those. And as you know, and was just outlined, the services like Kids Peace provides are in high demand by these agencies right now, and in an effort to help address that demand, we worked very hard for the last 2 years to raise the funds to add 20 additional beds, which we hope to open in October and receive our first kids for that additional 20 bed unit in October. Unfortunately, you know the dilemma that we get in on the state funding process by having new students that we didn't have when we had 60. Now we're going to have 80. Our staff has put together a very detailed, itemized spreadsheet of what we need. That number is $223,467, and I think maybe that's been provided to the staff here. So on behalf of Kids Peace and the kids we serve, and frankly I think on behalf of DFACS and DJJ as well, I respectfully ask you to recommend that this one-time request be included in the upcoming budget. And if you have any tough questions, Patricia will answer them.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Chairman Lunson, do you have a question? Okay, thank you. Anybody else from committee? Well, thank y'all very much. Thank you for the good job you do, and thank you for this sheet, and we'll certainly take it up.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, school nurses. Lynn Meadows, is she here? Yes, thank y'all. And Lisa Morris also, yeah, okay.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Representative Dickey, for letting us speak to you on behalf of school nurses in Georgia. As you know, as you know, school nurses are on the front lines keeping children and staff safe, well, and ready to learn. The budget of 2019 reflects a $580,000 cut to school nurses across Georgia. I realize this is based on the QBE formula. Enrollment may be down in some areas, but it's not down in my area and many others across Georgia. Probably that would entail losing about 15 or 20 school nurses. School nurses really need to be in every school. In Georgia, they're not in every school. So, I mean, the QBE formula is a little skewered in that. So how do you say that a school with 500 students, you know, doesn't get a nurse, whereas one that has 1,200 students gets a nurse? It's just, you know, and it could be 200 students or whatever. We need a nurse in every school in Georgia. We need an RN. I don't know if y'all know, I'm sure you do, because I'm sure flu has hit hard in this area too. School nurses are working tirelessly to triage kids right now. To take a nurse out of a school would be detrimental. We're seeing more and more chronic medical conditions, fragile children. We even have kids that are at school with trachs. They require catheterizations. And we also have a few children in Georgia that are on ventilators that are nurse-supported as well. We would like to also add that we have applied for a grant, and it has been received by the Georgia DOE, and it's a Medicaid funding grant, which is a match funding, and it will match dollar for dollar. So the $580,000 is really not $580,000. It's a $1.1 million cut for school nurses. This could be our finally our opportunity to have a nurse in every school in Georgia, because it will allow us to grow the school nurses in Georgia. There are so many kids with so many needs. Recently, there was a young lady last week who died in Coweta County, flu. We're seeing children right now who are presenting with flu-like symptoms, and they may or may not even have a fever. It is the strangest thing we've ever seen this year. It's worse than it was in 2009, and I stood up before y'all in 2009 and asked that y'all not cut our budget then, and we thought it was going to be bad that year. It's horrific this year. We would like for you to consider asking that $580,000 be replaced as a line item. And I'm going to let Lynn Meadows talk to you about some of the things that she's seeing in Fulton County. I'm in Glenn County. I'm a lead nurse, and actually I'm with the CTAE program is my school. So my school is technically not really funded, because in the overall system in Glenn County we have about 13,000 kids, but those kids come from our high schools over to our career academy. So if you think about it, I'm out here at our career academy, but that 750 equation, it's not really conducive to having a nurse at that school. But fortunately, my county, being in Glenn County, we have a higher tax base, and they are able to put money back into the school nurse budget, because it's not totally funded by what is, by the DOE money. So we would just like for you to put that back. Lynn?
Yep, thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon.
Well, no, welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Lynn Meadows. As she said, I serve as my day job is the coordinator of student health services for Fulton County School System, but I'm also for the Georgia Association of School Nurses, the state director for the National Association of School Nurses. So I represent all of the school nurses in the state of Georgia on the national level. And things that Lisa said are so true. I'm going to speak a little bit about my district specifically, because I can tell you about my district specifically, and then I can tell you a little bit from a state perspective and then from a national perspective, and it'll be really quick. So for our school district, for instance, Fulton County has 98,000, roughly between 96 and 98,000 children in our school district. We have a staff of 23 registered nurses for 96,000 kids. We have 106 buildings. In each of our buildings, what we have, though, is an unlicensed clinic assistant, but from a registered nurse standpoint, I have 23 nurses. Out of our 96,000 kids, and you may say, well, how do you know your information? Because school nurses, we capture a lot of data, so when we need to tell our story, we have real, actual information. So of our 96,000 kids, I have 33,000 kids, over 33,000 kids that have a medical issue. So that's a third of our kids that either have something from, it can be asthma, diabetes, recovering from brain cancer, to mental health issues, to asthma issues, allergy issues, the whole gamut we see. In our school district, again, we use our registered nurses to help cover every school, but there's not a licensed registered nurse in every school. So my school nurses spend a lot of time going from school to school. With even what is proposed in the budget to be cut, that may not impact a huge district like Fulton County or Cobb, but in a sense it does, because we still don't have the number of school nurses that we need in the first place, even in a big school district like Fulton County. So for that funding decrease, I share in that concern with even our smaller schools in the rural areas when we talk about the ratio, and there's a national ratio for one school nurse to every 750 students. Well, just because a kid, as Lisa said, there's a school district that might only have 300 kids, those 300 kids, if you think about acuity,
of those 300 kids, you may have 5 kids that have diabetes, 4 kids with asthma, and so to take that nurse out of the building is just not the right thing to do. One of the other things that I just wanted to mention from a national standpoint is that we know research has shown that there is a clear connection between academic success and school health services and school nurses. So although we're nurses and we're passionate about school nursing, I want to go back to the research. It clearly shows where schools have school nurses and school services, kids are healthier, they do better in school academically, and you may ask, well, why? Because if we put them in the best health status that we can, they're able to exceed better in the classroom. So our thing is better health, better learning, and that's just been a clear connection of what school nurses can bring to school systems. We also impact, obviously, attendance. If children are healthier, they attend school more. So that's decreasing less days that they've missed. They're healthier kids. Healthier kids tend to grow up to be healthier adults, and then thus healthier communities. So for instance, when Lisa mentioned about flu, we are working tireless around the clock. I can't tell you how many communications I've put out just in Fulton County alone to help parents about things like flu prevention, et cetera. Because if our kids are healthy, they'll go home and hopefully impact what's going on in the community. So those are some kind of unsung hero things that school nurses do without people knowing. The other thing is that parents have a reliance on school nurses. We joke about this as school nurses, but this is so true. Oftentimes, a student might be sick at home, and what the first thing that they'll say to a parent will say to a child is, oh, well, tomorrow morning, just go see the school nurse. So we're that first line of the invisible healthcare provider that takes care of kids, even when parents aren't. The first line is not to call the pediatrician. It's to tell children, well, tomorrow go see your school nurse. And then it's for us to determine that maybe potentially what care needs to be exercised at that point. So again, I would just implore you to not allow that what may seem a small increment in a decrease in funding is significant to already in a field where we don't have enough school nurses. And when they're even in the 2018 going into 2019, we still do not have licensed nurses in every school.
Okay. Thank y'all both very much for being here, and we'll certainly take that under consideration. I think I hear a question. Representative Chandler.
May I ask you, you said 23 RNs in Fulton County schools.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have LPNs in the
No,
schools
ma'am.
in addition?
So we deliver health services in Fulton County through a shared team approach. So my registered nurses act as case managers, so they have a caseload of schools. So we divide all of our 106 schools. So one of my RNs, for instance, may have 6 schools. And so she goes around to those 6 schools on a daily basis to make sure that we're checking in with that unlicensed person. And the unlicensed persons, I will tell you, the RNs work very hard to make sure that they're trained, that they're appropriately to care for students, but again, it's not a licensed nurse.
May I ask another?
Yes, absolutely.
And this may be impossible to answer in light of what you just said, but I wonder how many schools in Georgia do not have a school nurse?
We're actually working on capturing that data through the Department of Education, and that's an excellent question. We would love to be able to track that information for you. It seems like, and this is just an honest statement, because I've been a school nurse, I was brought into Fulton County to create their school nurse program. I used to be the Assistant Vice President of Nursing at Grady. And I will tell you, in my 18 years of being in the school district, the number is constantly changing and shifting because we get funding and we hire school nurses. The funding goes away, so we lose nurses. A lot of the nurses leave they come in for a year and they leave the profession because on an average, an RN in the school district makes about $25,000 to $30,000 a year. They can go down to Grady, easily work 3 shifts, 12-hour shifts, and make $60,000 a year. So it's tough.
Okay, thank you. Chairman Coleman.
Is it true, I want to ask, I guess I can ask Sarah, isn't it true though that nurses it's the only position that we required in the budget that we fund by category rather? In other words, they get flexibility with their other money. They don't have to hire counselors, they don't have to have, they get funded, but they don't have to necessarily use that. But if we fund nurses, the school systems have to use that for nurses. They don't. So that I thought they did, but they don't. They can use it for anything they want to. And they don't have to hire if I'm not mistaken, they can hire one certified nurse and then they can supervise a lot of nurses. Is that true, is the way they work it?
It is not, well,
I mean, they allow that, is that correct?
They-
If you have a certified nurse in a county, they could put non-certified people in schools as long as they're under, is that correct, the way we allow it?
they can do that, but they're unlicensed people, and they are not nurses.
No, I'm just saying, but we do allow, that's what's
Oh,
happening.
there are. There's been no one
that's
to
what's
govern,
happening.
right.
Right.
There's been no one to govern or to oversee the funding, you know, and there's systems out there that do not have a nurse. All they have is
Or
clinic
parents,
aides.
yeah.
Or a parent.
Or a
Trained
parent, or parent. And, you know, maybe she had some, or he.
But they have to have a certified nurse maybe in that system overall of it, is that correct?
To your point, though, they are supposed to, but I think what Lisa is saying is it's not governed very well. So like
Okay.
in Fulton County, we do. Like me, I'm a nurse with a master's
And
degree.
you have all these
So I
others.
can oversee that program, which is the right way to do it if you're not gonna have a licensed nurse in every school. But you've gotta have enough registered nurses. We're seeing, just because of the acuity of kids, each one of my schools, I dare say, in 106 schools, our schools at least have 2 or 3 diabetic students. To
Yeah.
calculate insulin, et cetera, takes an RN. That's, you know, we don't want to leave that per chance to an unlicensed person. We can help govern that. So to your point, that's exactly right. We should have.
But I
a
was
super-
thinking a few years ago that we required, that we said, when we gave the flexibility, they could use their money for counselors, but they had to use nurse money for nurses or these others. That's what I thought we were, but I guess
We'll
you're saying.
look into that.
I want to look into that.
That's a great question.
I thought we did that.
There's a few systems even in Georgia that are not following Nurse Practice Act that we know about. There are LPNs that have been hired. Nurse Practice Act requires that there be an RN or a physician
To oversee.
oversee because they're not registered nurses, and they are supposed to practice, and the superintendents will not hear what the LPNs are saying or the aides that, hey, we need someone to help us.
I'm not sure. Okay. Thank you. We'll look into that then.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you
very
so much for
being
allowing us.
here.
Thank you.
Appreciate that information.
Thank you.
And the good job student nurses doing. Ooh. Next on our list, Hannah Heck with Westside Atlanta Charter School. She here? Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for your time today, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. You were wise to have everyone sit here and listen to everyone coming up, because we realize what a big job you have in front of you. So thank you for hearing all the things that are really important in the state and for education. I'm Hannah Heck. I come as a founding board member of Westside Atlanta Charter School. I'm currently vice chair of the board as well. But I hope you would indulge me and let me tell a brief story as a parent of a charter school student, 3 charter school students. I have 4 kids. Our 3 oldest go to our charter school. And during the snowstorm, our youngest, the kindergartner, came in, and I said, you need to wear gloves if you're going out there. And she told me very innocently, well, Mom, Coach K said that once we get out there, the blood starts moving and we don't feel cold. And I stopped, and it made me feel a little bit sad, because I realized Coach K, her PE teacher, said that because our kids have PE outside. We don't have facilities for a gymnasium, so our school meets in a mixed income community. We're split, but part of our school meets in the bottom floor of the apartment building that was meant for retail. It's been built out. And so our students have physical education in a fenced-off area of that parking in the apartment buildings. And it's often cold, and it often smells like trash. And it's her favorite subject among many others. She loves PE, and she learns a lot of lessons, but that's one I wish she didn't have to learn. And we have a lot of other facility and space constraints in our charter school. In year 1, we built out that retail space I mentioned. We outgrew it. We have quite a waiting list. We built modular units, kind of a walk up the hill. That's where half of our school is now. We outgrew that in year 3, and we'll outgrow a second set of modulars that we built this year, at which time we'll go to an APS school for the next 2 years. APS won't give us the space beyond that, and we'll have to find somewhere else to go after that point. As a board member, I can tell you that facilities have been something as a charter school that we have constantly discussed. It's been a focus of our budget discussions, where we focus our time and attention. And I know that, you know, our school constantly has to fight to keep the right things on our radar. How are our students performing? What are those essential expenditures? But facilities take up a ton of our mental energy and space because we don't have the same type of funding as a traditional public school. And so we were very excited to hear about the passage of House Bill 430 last year and the potential for facility funding. And like I said, I know that you all have many things before you today as you're considering the budget, but I would ask that you would consider funding at least a portion of that facility funding for charter schools. It is incredibly beneficial. I know that facilities are a big challenge for us, and I also know that we have it really good. We're an APS-approved charter school, and so that means our funding is higher than a lot of other charter schools. While facility funding is a challenge, we have a pretty cooperative relationship with our authorizer, and they're working with us to try to find things, but it is a major challenge. We have just started having students attending our board meetings, raising their own personal concerns, and I love it. I love to hear a 6th grader stand up, or a 5th grader stand up and say what their challenges are, but it also breaks my heart that there's not a whole lot we can do about it. When they say, why can't I have this? Why can't I have these things that like my neighbor down the street has at their school? And just because we don't have the money to do it. And so, again, I know you're balancing so many things, but know that facility funding for charter schools would go a long way, be very appreciated. And so I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for coming. Any questions? I know it's a real challenge doing this, and so thank you for coming here and giving us that firsthand.
Certainly. Thank you for your support.
Experience with that. All right.
Thank you.
Delano Ford, Teach for America. Welcome. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman and committee. It is with deep gratitude that I stand before you, thanking you once again for the support that you all have provided Teach for America. Your deep partnership and investment in our program has allowed us to attract other private and public partnerships to the state and have allowed us to expand our impact over the years. I am Delano Ford. I'm the Executive Director of Teach for America, and I think that you understand our organization well, but just really briefly, we find, develop, and support leaders who come to the classroom, and we support them in their commitment to education for the 2 years and beyond that they work in this space. We also recognize that their work begins with leadership in the classroom and can expand to a lot of opportunities that continue to support some of our most vulnerable students and communities. We have had consistently high impact in our classrooms. We see our first year teachers getting at least 1 year of growth within their first year, and most times much more than that, a year and a half in some of our best scenarios. We have about 97%, we do a national study in which we ask principals about their satisfaction with Teach for America, and 97% of our principals would recommend hiring a Teach for America core member for their schools, and that is 97% of Metro Atlanta principals who have taken that survey have said that. And then 91% of our principals across the country have said the same thing. Your investment attracts more, allows us to attract more educators to the space, many of which are career changers. I heard Mr. Henson speak a little bit about that earlier today too. We've been able to attract some career changers to the space, and they bring a level of gravitas as well as impact in the classroom in that way. the Georgia audit, which you all may know about, we did a Georgia audit, which basically audited the impact that we've been having over the past 15 years, and it said that consistently our core members have been producing incredible results for kids, and I have some results here that I'll leave behind with you to take a look at. And finally, we also hired a national researcher to conduct a similar study to triangulate the data as well, and they, based on their own research and their national standards, also found the same solutions, especially in math, social studies, special education. You can see that those results are incredibly high when a core member is teaching those subjects. I'll open up for any questions that you might have.
Do we have any questions? Thank you. Thank you very much for good organization, Teach America. And
thank you a lot for your
results.
continued support.
Thank you for being here.
Of course.
Okay, one last person, but not the least. Ascended College Board.
Good afternoon, committee. Thank you so much. I'd like to begin by saying thank you for the allocation and the recommendation in the amended FY18 budget for low-income advanced placement students. Over 13,000 students are going to have access to non-STEM AP exams, which lead to college credit for them later on and tuition savings. We're here to ask for the same support for this same group of students in the FY19 budget. However, we would need an addition because in the AFY budget, as you know, there's a $350,000 federal allocation that's being used. It will not be available in the FY19 budget year. So again, to cover the same group of students, to make sure they have access to college credit bearing opportunities, we ask for an addition in the FY19 budget.
Okay. Any questions? She can, Sandy, I'm sure, can get us up all the
Yes, sir.
financials, got those.
Absolutely.
What we need, and we'll be talking about those.
Okay.
Very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that completes the list of speakers signed up. Due to the late hour, I thank my committee for their patience and staying here. Some very good testimony, and we've got our challenges in front of us with our budget, and look forward to having a discussion about where we go from here. So thank y'all for being here. If I see no other business, I'll adjourn this meeting.